Hello everybody, my name is Bill Labouré and I'm the host of a new show we're calling Help Rescue Vocations, where we look at the Catholic vocation crisis in this country and we look at some solutions that have been offered for trying to help men and women who are entering seminary or religious life to overcome whatever kind of obstacles or impediments they might have to entering into formation. So we're going to talk about that in some detail. We've got a special guest, so stay tuned. Hello everybody, welcome back to our show. As I mentioned before, my name is Bill Labouré and I'm the host of this new show called Help Rescue Vocations. I am also the Director of Advancement for the Labouré Society, which is a national organization in this country that helps men and women who are discerning a vocation to priesthood or religious life to overcome their student loan debt problem so that they can enter into religious formation. And we're going to talk a little bit about this afternoon with our guest, Mr. Bill Duffert, who is discerning for priesthood for the Archdiocese of St. Paul in Minneapolis. Bill, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Bill, we're going to be talking about the Labouré Society and the work that it's been doing with you and you've been doing with it to help with your student loan debt. But tell the audience a little bit about your background and how you first came to be discerning a vocation to priesthood.
Yeah, I grew up in a Catholic family, always practiced the faith, and that was something that was a blessing. I went to Catholic school, kindergarten through college, and went to church on Sundays with my family, prayed before meals, and that was really the basis of my faith life. It was very easy for me to dive deeper into my faith later on in college and after college as well.
They say that the first seminary is really the home or the family. So could you tell our audience a little bit about how your mom and dad helped form and nurture your faith?
Yeah, my mom and dad, God bless them, they were very, very instrumental in me staying close to the faith throughout high school, throughout college, and after college. A few things stick out to me when I was growing up. For example, when we would go on hunting trips with my dad and my brother, we would always get up early in the morning, go to Mass together, and down in southwestern Minnesota in some of those farming communities, Mass is quite early. And that was something that stuck out to me, that we would even take time to go to Mass together when we were on vacation, on a hunting trip.
Do you have any brothers or sisters?
I do. I have a younger brother and an older sister, and I'm very blessed that they are supportive of my vocation.
Good, good. Tell our audience a little bit about when you first began to discern a call, and how did that take place?
Yeah, despite being close to the Catholic faith and practicing my faith growing up, it really wasn't until my junior year of college I remember feeling as though God might be calling me to become a priest. At the time I was an undergrad, I was living on my own and having fun in this college setting, but there was this lack of joy. And at the time I began going to the on-campus chapel and just sitting in silence, journaling, and my prayer life really started to develop into this conversation with Christ. At that time, it was when I started noticing this very quiet and persistent stirring in my heart. And I tell people sometimes it was annoying how persistent it was. And I didn't want to think about it or pay attention to it because I had plans for my life. I wanted to graduate, have a family, get married, not in that order. And I kind of pushed it aside. I pushed it to the back of my thoughts. And it really wasn't until 3 years later, after graduating from college, that I remember being in the confessional and having a priest ask me if I had ever thought about becoming a priest. And it was at that moment that light switch went off. I had to admit to myself, yeah, I've been thinking about this for a long time now. And I almost didn't want to tell the priest either, but I had to admit, Father, help me out here, because I've been thinking about this for over 3 years now.
Now, when you began to think about pursuing priesthood and entering into the seminary, as we know, and we're going to be talking about this later, you had some student loan debt. And why don't you tell the audience how the student loan debt problem affects some of the vocations in this country?
Yeah, the good thing is there are men and women out there that are pursuing religious vocations, that are being called to religious life. One of the obstacles that they are facing is the student loan debt crisis. A lot of dioceses and orders cannot assume any student loan debt, and that's something that I was faced with when I started discerning and wanted to enter the seminary.
And we at the Labouré Society, who help men and women who are discerning to overcome that student loan debt, some of the statistics are very interesting. And why don't you tell our audience in terms of how many are discerning and how many in this country may have a student loan debt problem?
There was a study done in 2010, and it showed that at any given time annually there are 10,000 men and women discerning a religious vocation within the U.S. And of those 10,000, 42% of them are blocked from continuing their formation or from starting their formation.
Because they have student loan debt.
Because they have student loan debt.
And I think that's an important statistic for our audience to understand. There are 10,000 men and women in this country discerning a vocation, which is an answer to prayer. We've been praying for vocations as Catholics for decades. But this problem of 42% of them being blocked from entering into formation because of student loan debt. So we're talking upwards of 4,000 men and women in this country who have this student loan debt problem.
Right, annually. And
the Labouré Society is an organization that you're very familiar with because you're working with them right now. And I'm a staff member of the Labouré Society. Why don't you tell our audience what the Labouré Society is and what its mission is in helping with furthering vocations?
Yeah, the Labouré Society is a Catholic nonprofit and is dedicated to helping men and women with religious vocations overcome educational loans through fundraising. The way it works is men and women with religious vocations apply to this group and are placed into a 6-month fundraising class. And within that class, we pool our funds together, and at the end of the 6 months, each of us is given an award amount based on a few metrics, based on our efforts, based on total amount that we raise, based on our individual need. Those are the metrics used to distribute the funds.
And at the Labouré Society, what we do is group men and women into a class of fundraisers so that they can go out and fundraise. And I want to talk about that in a little bit more detail. So ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back after the break and we'll talk in more detail about the Labouré Society. So please stay tuned. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We're here at the show called Help Rescue Vocations. And before the break, we were talking about the Labouré Society, which is a national nonprofit organization that helps discerning priests and religious overcome their student loan debt so that they can enter into formation. Before the break, we were talking about the fact that there are around 4,000 men and women in this country today discerning a vocation, but who are blocked from moving forward because they have student loan debt.
Yes.
And the Labouré Society helps them overcome that debt. So tell our audience a little bit about how the Labouré Society works and how you were able to enter or be admitted into the Labouré Society.
Yeah, so as I said, once we apply to the group, we're placed into this 6-month fundraising class, and we don't just get sent out to do fundraising. First, we're really trained by Labouré Society. We're given the tools for success as to how to reach out to people, how to build relationships. For example, before these 6 months of fundraising even begins, we gather together here in Minneapolis for what we call a boot camp. We are together as a class. We get to meet each other and also learn a little bit about the spirituality of fundraising. We learn about the biblical basis for fundraising, and we get to really prepare ourselves before we go back out into our respective dioceses.
Now, we at the Labouré Society with our program, and the program's been in place since 2011, but the Labouré Society's been around since 2004, helping men and women with student loan debt. But tell us about the class model that you're talking about. You're not out there raising funds individually for yourself, you're raising funds as a class. Tell our audience how that works.
Yeah, it's different than, say, your GoFundMe page. You are raising funds for Vocations. You're representing this class. For example, this current 6-month fundraising session that we're in, we have 22 aspirants, is what we're called. We're aspiring Vocations. And we raise funds for Vocations for this current class of 22 of us.
So you're not seeking money for yourself in that class, you're seeking money for everybody in the class. You're sort of helping each other out.
Correct.
But the Labouré Society, during that fundraising process, they keep track of who's raising the money so that you get credit for funds raised, correct?
Correct, because as I said, your efforts, they're taken into account at the end of the 6 months when that award amount is given out.
Now, one of the fascinating things about the Labouré Society is the way in which it's able to accelerate the elimination of student loan debt. Now, I don't want you to tell the audience what your exact debt was, but it was into the 6 figures, and you've been working through the Labouré program. And how long is it taking you to be able to eliminate your debt so that you can enter into the seminary?
Yeah, my situation was unique, not uncommon, but unique because I had a significant amount of student loan debt. And it has taken me, this will be coming up on 2 years of fundraising with the Labouré Society, and I'm on track to begin formation at the seminary this fall.
And that 6-figure debt bill, if you were to pay that off on your own, without the help of the Labouré Society, how long would it take?
It would have taken me most likely 15 years. And you never know, maybe God would have provided a generous donor to come forward throughout that time, but I would have had to go back to work. I was teaching at the time, and I would have had to work for maybe 15 years, maybe more, before I could finally begin my studies.
And do you think if you or anyone that's discerning a vocation to priesthood or religious life has to wait 15 or 18 or 20 years, isn't there a good possibility that those people are going to abandon their vocation?
Yeah, there are plenty of distractions out there, and if you see yourself working for 15 years, you could possibly persevere through that time, really fight for your vocation through that time, but it would be difficult to wait those 15 years before entering. And sometimes with some of the women, for example, their orders have an age limit. So if they're maybe over 35 years old, they can't join formation anymore or enter formation.
When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about the details of the Labouré Society and also talk about how the money is awarded to the classes at the end of the 6 months and whether people are allowed to come back for additional classes after they finish the first 6-month class. So please stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We've been talking with Bill Duffert, who's discerning a vocation to priesthood for the Archdiocese of St. Paul and Minneapolis. And we are talking about the Labouré Society, which is an extraordinary organization that is helping men and women overcome student loan debt so that they can enter into formation. And Bill was just telling us about the fundraising model that Labouré teaches and the skills and attributes that we teach the men and women going through the Labouré program. So Bill, I would just like to go back real quick to the 4-day boot camp you were talking about and tell our audience some of the things that are taught during the boot camp and how you put those things to use.
Yeah, the boot camp is very intensive because there's a lot of things that you can learn before entering into the 6 months of fundraising. We affectionately say it's like drinking from a fire hose because there's so much to take in. But Labouré Society does really well with preparing us before we go back to our respective dioceses. For example, before we even have the boot camp, we were given different readings, one specifically on the spirituality of fundraising. And then when we're there at boot camp, we're taught more about how to build these relationships with potential benefactors. We're taught how to build this donor network. And we're also assigned an accountability partner. Each aspirant is given this partner, and they're there to really help us throughout the 6 months. So it's not as if once boot camp's over, we are just sent back to our homes and our parishes.
And the accountability partner in our program at Labouré is very important because this man or woman who's in essence sort of a mentor checks in with you or the aspirants once a week in order to encourage and inspire and pray with and help you overcome challenges. Is that what you found to be true with the accountability partner relationship?
Yeah, most definitely. And it's always difficult if you're in the area or in a diocese by yourself. And remember, this is nationwide, so let's say
Right.
I'm the only one in the Archdiocese fundraising with Labouré Society. It's helpful having that person that you can touch base with on a weekly basis and really tell them, okay, this is what I did last week, these are my goals for this upcoming week, and bounce ideas off them. And typically the accountability partners have some type of a background in either fundraising or maybe a business background. So they're very familiar with building donor networks or building relationships, social skills.
So I think it's important for our audience to know that during that 6 month of fundraising, you have an immediate lifeline to the home office in Minneapolis. You've got accountability partner help. You've also got the executive director of the program who runs the program meeting with you on a weekly basis. Tell the audience about the conferences you have weekly.
Yeah, so as well as having these phone calls or meetings with your accountability partner, you're also giving these meetings with the group as a whole. So the executive director and all other aspirants, we get onto kind of a Skype call, a conference call where we can touch base with each other, see how things are going, talk about different topics throughout the 6 months.
And what we find out at Labouré is that care that's provided to the aspirants over the 6 months with the accountability partner and checking in with the online conferences at the office and also checking in with an aspirant care specialist, that care over the 6 months helps the aspirants raise even more money.
Yeah.
Now, we in the Labouré Society, you mentioned right now we have a class of about 22 or 23 for the 6 month class, but just tell our audience a little bit about the kind of amounts of money aspirants are able to raise together in one of these classes.
So typically coming into the program, an aspirant will have on average $60,000 in student loan debt. That might be a little bit more than the national average, but that's what we've been noticing. These men and women that are pursuing a religious vocation, they typically have around $60,000. So within that 6 months, we try to shoot for that as a target, but we are pooling funds together as a class, and you can do the math. If we all hit our target, most of the time, almost all of the aspirants will be able to enter formation. However, some, as in my case, have maybe a more significant amount of student loan debt, so they're able to come back for another 6 months. So potentially you could be doing 2 6-month programs or 3 or
Depending on your
even
debt
4,
level.
depending on your debt level.
And the average raise per aspirant in a class is about $40,000 at Labouré. So if you have, for instance, 20 in the class, they each raise $40,000. You're talking about a raise of $800,000 in just 6 months.
Yeah.
And the magic, if you will, of the Labouré program is its ability to accelerate the elimination of your student loan debt. And why don't you talk a little bit about that in terms of what your debt was coming into Labouré and how long it might have taken you if you were paying it off on your own?
Yeah, so when I was discerning whether or not to move back to the Archdiocese here and to enter formation, I was faced with this obstacle, as I mentioned, and I was really looking at a couple of options. And one of them was, well, maybe I could go back to work, maybe I could go back to teaching. And at the time, there were different loan forgiveness plans where you would work as a public school teacher for 15 years and you would get a significant amount forgiven. But in this case, in this scenario, it would have taken me the 15 years to really decrease my student loan debt to an amount that was acceptable for the Archdiocese.
And you have, we're not going to tell the exact amount, but you had considerable six-figure debt.
Yeah.
And through the Labouré program, you're going to eliminate that debt in 24 months as compared to 15 to 18 to 20 years.
Correct.
Which is extraordinary.
Yeah.
And many of the men and women going through the program, that we have men and women with high 5-figure debt eliminating that debt in 6 months.
Yeah.
Low 6-figure debt they're eliminating in 12 to 18, and even higher 6-figure debt at 24 months.
Yeah.
If we had to wait 15 to 18 to 20 years, we would lose most, if not all, of these vocations, and that's a loss to the church forever.
Yeah.
And we know in the Catholic Church that one vocation lost is one too many. So at the end of the class, just tell us real quickly about what is done in terms of the money that's raised.
So at the end of the class, we pool our funds together, as I mentioned, and we're given this award amount. It's based on our efforts, based on the total amount we raise, and based on our individual need. And then if it's an amount that's acceptable by your respective diocese or order, you can enter into formation, and that amount is not given towards your loans until 3 years of formation have passed.
And once you've been awarded a particular amount of money based on your fundraising, then that is awarded to you and it's applied to your debt. And if it's enough for you to enter into formation, then we at Labouré pay your lenders directly over the course of 3 years while you're in formation. And if you're still in formation at the end of the 3 years, then Labouré pays off the bulk of the debt. Correct?
Correct.
All right. And tell our listening audience when you are hoping to enter into seminary.
God willing, I'll be entering this fall, and that would put me at an ordination date of spring 2021.
And but for Labouré, spring of 21, you'd still be paying off your own student loans.
Yes, I would still be working, and I'd be making those minimum payments. But thanks be to God for Labouré Society, that process has really been expedited, and I've been able to enter this fall.
Thank you, Bill Duffert. God bless
Thank
your
you.
priesthood and the rest of your formation. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening today. We're going to continue to have this show where we're going to talk about the vocations crisis in this country. But please keep in mind the Labouré Society. We're proud of the program, and you can visit our website, rescuevocations.org. That's rescuevocations.org to learn more about the Labouré Society. Thank you very much.